Well, good afternoon, everybody. Merry Christmas and welcome to our December Lunch with a Leader. My name is Stephanie Ford, and on behalf of our staff here, I want to welcome you today. I know for sure that we have a couple of first-time guests in the room. How many, show of hands, how many of you, is this your very first Lunch with a Leader today, if you wouldn't mind? Welcome. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, we say this every time, but the purpose of Lunch with a Leader is to gather leaders such as yourself from all across our community, all different sorts of areas. And it is our hope and desire that if we can pour into you and encourage you, then you can take that same encouragement back into your sphere of influence, and that together we can sort of raise the spiritual temperature, if you will, of our community. We couldn't do what we do, though, without some help from some great friends. So our friends at Chick-fil-A, if you would help me welcome them and thank them. And I'm gonna put him on the spot, and I know he doesn't like this, but we have somebody today who is celebrating their 25th anniversary with Chick-fil-A, and it is their birthday today, and that is Mr. Andy Duncan. A round of applause. You guys know Andy is so generous with his time and with his resources, and so we are so thankful for the role that he plays in our community. So we're going to go ahead and get going today. Again, the purpose of Lunch with a Leader, as I said, is to hopefully encourage and equip you. And the way that we do that is we take a look at the life of a leader from Scripture, and we look at maybe some things they did right, some things they didn't do quite so right, and we try to learn from that in our own leadership journey. So this last stretch, we've been looking at the life of Joseph. And if you weren't here last month, let me just give you a little catch up, get us all up to speed. In chapter 39 of Genesis, we've seen that Joseph has been wrongly accused and he's been thrown into prison. However, while he was in prison, because of the Lord's kindness, he was granted favor with the prison guard. And so we're going to begin reading. This is quite lengthy today. So we're going to begin reading in Genesis 40, and hopefully you guys can follow along. So here we go, Genesis 40. Sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with these two officials, and he put them in prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain of the guard. They remained in prison for quite some time, and the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them. While they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked upset. "Why do you look so worried today?" he asked them. And they replied, "We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean." "Interpreting dreams is God's business," Joseph replied. "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. "In my dream," he said, "I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand, so I took a cluster of the grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." "This is what the dream means," Joseph said. "The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I'm here in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I had a dream too. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white pastries stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head." "This is what the dream means," Joseph told him. "The 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now," now let me just tell you, when my kids read this story, this is how it goes. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. Womp, 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 womp. That's that. The birds will come and peck away at your flesh." Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he prepared a banquet for all his officials and staff. He summoned his chief cupbearer and chief baker to join the other officials. He then restored the chief cupbearer to his former position, so he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. So, as we listen to that story today, we're going to begin to unpack that a little bit. And here's the question we would love for you to talk about a little bit at your tables as Mike gets ready to come up here. Why can showing kindness in business be considered a weakness? Go ahead and talk about that. Mike will be up in just a minute. Thanks for being here.
Well, hello, everybody. If I've never met you before, my name is Mike. It's an honor to welcome you here to December Lunch with a Leader. We're honored that you took time out of your crazy busy days to be here with us. And a huge thanks again to Chick-fil-A. These guys are the best. We were just sitting there. I was telling a good friend here, I'm going to introduce here in a second, a few minutes ago, we're probably 7,500 to 8,000 lunches that they have given away since we started. Isn't that amazing? Just amazing. Just crazy, 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 crazy. All right. Why is it considered many times a weakness? We've got coaches here, we've got athletic directors here, we've got folks from our armed services here, we got people from business here, law enforcement here. Why is sometimes kindness seen as a weakness in leadership? Who wants to throw me out a thought from your table? Not everybody at one time. All right, here we go. Who's got an idea? Why is it sometimes considered a weakness?
People take advantage of you sometimes, just when you are kind.
People take advantage of you when you're kind. Is that true? Yes, it's going to happen. Why else is also kindness? Why can it be considered a weakness?
I think it's easier to tell somebody no when they're kind.
It's easier to tell somebody no when they're kind, okay? Because you don't think they're going to be mean back, right? All right, I get that. Why else can kindness be considered a weakness?
A lot of people consider a leader that has to be, or they don't expect kindness from them.
Yeah. They just don't expect it, right? There are certain arenas that you walk into, kindness throws you off. Literally, I would say one of the kindest people I have ever met was the former probably 3 coaches ago, Falcons coach Mike Smith. He was one of the winningest coaches in Falcon history. Mike Smith was kind. He was kind. I remember it was the night before the NFC Championship game, and they had called the week before. They had won the game, and they said, listen, we wanted to see if you could come back. I'd just been down there. Could you come back down and do chapel again before the NFC Championship game, and we'll give you tickets to the NFC Championship? And being a man of prayer, I thought I should pray about it. I went, yeah, I think I'm available. I do. I think the Lord just freed up my calendar. It's crazy. And so Casey and I went down there. I remember we got done with the event, and we're getting ready to go, and he gave us a coin. We had done a series that season through the book of Nehemiah, and I remember we're getting ready to walk out, and he stops me. And this is what he says. Now, this is the night before the biggest game of this man's life. He said, how are Shane, Troy, and my boy Shaq? How are they doing? Shane is Shane Queen from North Cobb High School, who played for him at Tennessee Tech. Troy was a linebacker who was a defensive coordinator at Allatoona, and Shaq was the head coach at Sprayberry at the time. He said, I want you to call those boys and tell them how proud I am of the men they've become. The night before the NFC Championship game. That is kind. He is a kind man. He got let go like 2 years later. We went down to Tampa Bay to be with them at preseason camp. And I had to check in and find out who I was a guest of. And I checked in, and the lady who picked me up on the golf cart said, that's the nicest man I've ever met. She said, he already knows my kids' names and my husband's name. Said he just spends time getting to know people. He's kind, right? Joseph modeled kindness. Now, Joseph's an interesting character because Joseph's one of the very few people you ever meet that there really isn't a bad story about. Usually somewhere along the way, you see some flaws in people's stories. Joseph's interesting because everything that could go wrong went wrong, but yet Joseph kept doing right. The biggest mistake was sharing his dream and the vision with who? His brothers. That was the mistake Joseph made. Didn't mean it was wrong. He was probably wrong timing doing it. But we learned some lessons from Joseph about how he handled the cupbearer and the baker that are for me and you. Okay? So let me say this. When this scenario happens, Joseph's in prison. Joseph is not like on a sabbatical. Joseph is not living really large and just gotten a bonus at work. Joseph is in prison, and he's in prison for something he didn't do. How many of you, if you were in prison and you were in prison for something you didn't do, could have a pretty sour attitude? Raise your hand. How many of y'all can have a sour attitude and not even be in prison? All right, there we go. That's more like it. And so that's Joseph. He's in prison, and yet Joseph continues to do the right things. So let me call time out, and let's circle back in the story. We cover characters from Scripture in this because God has left us a playbook on how to live. And I believe it's not just stories for us to read kids. I think it's people for us to learn principles from that we can apply to our lives. So in the middle of your tables are some outlines. You can go ahead and pull those outlines out. There are also some pens that you are welcome to keep one of those if you would like. But there are pens there, outlines there. There's also a QR code. If you want to do the QR code and do notes on your phone, there'll be a QR code that they will post up, I think. And if not, there it is. And so, but notes are on your table. You can do the QR code, and that way you can email yourself those notes. So let's dive in to Joseph's life. Here's what I'm going to say to begin today. Ready? Here's the phrase I want you to write down. Kindness wins. I believe at the end of every day, kindness wins. I think it wins in marriage. I think it wins in locker rooms. I think it wins in boardrooms. I think it wins in offices. Why? Because you never go wrong when you're kind. Never go wrong when you're kind. You go wrong when you're not kind. I remember a couple sitting down with me, and they came in for marriage counseling, and they sat down and they began to talk, and I said, okay, I've already figured out what the problem is. And they're like, really? Like, we've gone to a counselor for 6 years. We haven't figured out. What did you figure out? I said, y'all aren't nice. All right, be nice to each other. All right, we're done. All right, and so, because kindness wins. If you can be kind, and I don't believe kindness is a weakness. In fact, I believe it's a strength. Jesus said that kindness is one of the fruits of the Spirit, meaning when he is alive and well in us, kindness should come out of us. Ready? Principle number one. Joseph showed kindness by number one, he showed concern for them. It's really interesting. Really interesting. In verse 6, he said, why do you, cupbearer and baker, why do you look so worried today? Where is Joseph? Help me out. Where is he? Prison. And Joseph noticed they looked worried. Why do y'all look so worried today? What does that tell you about Joseph? What's Joseph doing? He cares. What is Joseph doing, though, with his eyes? He's observing. He's watching. I will be really honest with you. When I am in a bad place, I do not care that you're having a bad day, all right? What I care about is that I'm having a bad day, but not Joseph. Joseph noticed, and he said, you guys look worried today. Three things, ready? He watched their body language. He saw that they looked upset. It's interesting. He watched their body language. What's a way somebody shows that they look upset by their body language? Somebody raise your hand. What's a way that we see by body language somebody looks upset? Sad look on their face. Arms are crossed. Head down. Not engaging with people. Here's a little phrase I want you to write out beside that. Eyes up. So the University of Oklahoma softball girls made this a popular phrase a few years ago when they talked about their eyes are up. They always take their eyes and put them up. I believe as leaders, we have to keep our eyes up, right? As a leader, you got to own how you show up. You may be, how many of y'all have gone to work and had to fake how you felt? Raise your hand. As part of it. I remember years ago, Ronald Reagan had been an actor, and they said, how is acting going to help you as president? And he said, every day you got to act like a president. It's true. There's days you don't feel it, you don't want to feel it. Joseph went in, eyes up. He went in watching the story, and these people do not work for Joseph. He's a prisoner along with him, even though the warden has put him in charge of lots of things in the prison system. He's still one of them. He showed concern by their body language. Letter B, he asked how they were doing. And then he listened. He asked how they were doing, and then he listened. If you ask how someone's doing and you don't listen, what does that say? You don't care. I remember years ago, probably one of the best statements ever made on the podcast, a guy named Bob Tiede, who you've never met, probably never heard of. I found him, I'm trying to fill out the year, and he works with Campus Crusade, and he wrote a book called Leading by Asking Questions. That was his name of his book. And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. And so I had him on and didn't know him, and I remember he said, Mike, every time you ask a question, he's talking about in general, you have to ask the question to yourself, am I interested or am I listening to be interesting? Am I interested, meaning am I asking a follow-up question? If I want to be interesting, I'm waiting to hear their answer so I can give them a better answer. If y'all ever met one of these people before, it's like you aren't even done telling them, they're telling you a story. You've never had a conversation with me then because I've done that to you. And so that happens. I struggle with that. And he said, the key is the question behind the question. Joseph didn't just ask a question. He asked the question behind the question. What does that take though? Takes listening. What else does it take? What is that? Patience. What else? Concern. Empathy. Humility. I want you to write this other word out. Time, which we never have any of. We have packed schedules and hurried souls. There aren't a lot of good, deep conversations with people. Why? We don't have time. We have no margin in our schedule to have this conversation because we're heading to something else that's important. I want you to write this little thought down. Ready? People are our business. All of us. People are our business. Chief Westenberger is a chief of police. We've had this conversation many times sitting around the boardroom table at our spiritual leadership group. Why would you say, even as chief of police, that people are your business? What would you say? Relationships matter. And from law enforcement to business, relationships matter. Letter C, help them however you can. So what was interesting about Joseph was, Joseph had a gift of interpreting dreams. That was Joseph's gift. Got him in trouble once. He interpreted his own dream. And this is about to change Joseph's life. And when you get burned once, it's really easy to go, I'm not doing that again. But Joseph, to these two jokers sitting in prison, Joseph makes the decision, I'm gonna help them. Number two, he showed kindness to them. He showed kindness. Not only showed concern, he showed kindness. I want you to write this little thought down. Ready? Kindness is an action, not an intention. What's the difference between showing kindness and feeling like I should show kindness, but I just didn't do it? What's the difference? Difference is action. The difference is putting feet to what I felt when I really didn't feel it. Here we go, Genesis 4, verse 8. Steph read this second ago, and they replied, we both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean. Interpreting dreams is God's business, Joseph replied. Go ahead and tell me your dreams. And Joseph stopped, he cared, and he listened. While we are doing life, life is happening. And it is really easy to miss kind opportunities. They're all around us. And we got a backpack on and we're heading to our next meeting and we walked by our opportunity. I love this quote by Og Mandino. He said, beginning today, treat everyone you meet as if they're going to be dead by midnight. Extend to them all the care, the kindness, and understanding you can muster, and do it with no thought of any reward. Your life will never be the same again. Every day we get chances to show kindness. No, I'm going to call time out. Everybody look at me. Does everybody deserve it? That depends on your meriting schedule. Yes or no question. Is everybody you're going to show kindness to going to show it in return? Yes or no? No. So this is a spiritual, if somebody sucker punched you in, all right, this is a spiritual leadership lunch, all right? Somebody's like, why are we reading all this Bible stuff? All right, it's a spiritual leadership lunch, which I'm making the assumption you want to be, if not a spiritual leader. You want to lead with a bigger agenda than your own agenda. Leadership is moving people onto your agenda. Spiritual leadership is moving people onto God's agenda. Why at the heart of all of this does it make a difference for the Lord when we're kind? I want you to sit on that for a second. Why at the heart of all this? It's not just showing kindness to show kindness. Why is showing kindness at its core a Christ-like way to lead? George Manners, you've been in and out of lots of boardrooms and classrooms through the years. Why does it matter so much as a spiritual leader? What would you say? Boy, that's good. Brian Dodd, why do you think it matters so much? You have a chapter on this in your new book.
I think for me, there's 2 points, and I'll be very brief. Number one, it's a reminder that I need kindness. So you brought up spiritual leadership. Well, I've got enough sin that it drove Jesus to the cross, so I need kindness. Okay. So number one, I need kindness. Number two, as a Christian, you're a reflection of Christ to other people. Some people you may, as you like to say often, you may be the only Jesus some people ever meet. So every person has value. God wants to tell a story through every human life. So for me to add value and be kind to that person, that's what Jesus would do if he was here. So it's Jesus living through me. So number one, I need it. Number two, I need to reflect Jesus.
Ryan Dyer, you walk the halls of a high school up the street with thousands of students. You've been a basketball coach, you're an athletic director. Why is showing kindness a Christ-like thing for you feel like you have to think about it in what you do?
Well, I think about it like putting on a uniform. Like it's your every day if you suit up and, I made some comments today that were not lined up with what I want to be. So I think it's just, like Ryan just said, it's not really what you say, but it's what you do and how you carry yourself and the energy you have. I just want to reflect something different. And that's that you're either pointing people towards Jesus or you're pointing them away. It's not real hard.
So today, instead of a guest up here, I've got a clip I want you to watch. This clip is from a gentleman named Brant Hansen. Brant has written a book called Unoffendable. If you've never read it, you need to get it. It is a must-read book for every believer in business because as a Christian, you're going to get offended by people. They're going to offend you, like a lot. And he says, basically, we have no right to ever be offended. In fact, we make our greatest difference when we choose to be unoffendable. We have a guy on our, that Drew and Brian are on every Monday, do a Scouts Coaches Bible study. And we have a guy on that call that said, I wish that he's a Hall of Fame baseball coach. He said, if I'd have read this book 28 years ago, I'd have been a better coach. because I used to get offended by things my players would say and my players would do. And as a Christian, I'm like, you can't do that. I want you to listen to the story that Brant tells in the podcast from his book, and then we'll talk about it. Check this out, would you?
And you even go back to his first sermon in Matthew chapter 5 when he's talking about salt and light. And you tell the story in the book, and it's a great story, of John and Bill. And John is a friend of yours. They're baseball guys, they're baseball announcers, well-known baseball announcers. And you tell the story of John's influence. Unpack that story a little bit for everybody listening in. And what was the power of the influence that he carried?
So John is a pretty straight-laced guy. He's a brilliant announcer, and he also does, just for fun, he does PA for spring training games. He's just great. He's incredible at it. I filled in for him. The guy who sits next to him or sat next to him for years is very profane. I mean, just almost straight up pornographic in the way he would talk about women he was seeing in the stands and stuff. This is just in the press box, and he's working, he's a former major leaguer and had his day in the sun for sure. I don't want to identify who he is, but just really tough to take. And the whole time I'm sitting there and I'm hearing this stuff, I'm like, how in the world does John handle this? Because John's so straight-laced. And so this other guy, Bill, I changed his name, but he's like, do you know John? He said to me, like, yeah, I'm filling in for John because John asked me to fill in for him. He's like, that guy, let me show you what he did for me. And he goes and grabs this plaque, and it's a cover of Sports Illustrated that has Bill on it from back in the day. And John had it made for him and had put a message on the bottom of it. It was beautiful to Bill. And Bill starts crying while he's talking to me. He's like, that John, you know what about John? He treats everybody the same, he said. Like, this guy's gone through a lot of personal hurt. I don't know what happened or how he fell out with whatever, but not only did John tolerate him, John celebrated him. And he didn't flinch at the way he was. He's not scandalized by cuss words. He's not like, I can't hang out with this person. Like, there's something beautiful about that. Like, eventually, if you're going to be offended by people, eventually you will be offended by everyone.
Yep.
And you could walk away from everyone. And some people try to do that and they wind up very lonely, angry old guys. But like, or you can go, you know what? I know people are broken. I'm not surprised. I'm not scandalized. I'm going to celebrate this guy instead. And you could see, like, it's just unbelievable. This former major league, pretty significant guy has been broken, but he starts crying because John was such a gentleman. And I thought that's one of the best things. I emailed John the next day. I was like, I think that's the best testimony I've ever heard from somebody.
Yeah.
Like, in your absence.
Awesome. Why is it so easy to be offended and not show kindness? What would you say? Why is it so easy? Pride. It's hard. Listen, if showing kindness was easy, it would be easier for us to all do it. But it is not. It's something we have to work out. Number 3, ready? Joseph, this is interesting, was not only kind and showed concern, he was honest with them. And he tells them, 3 days from now, you're going to be restored. And 3 days from now, sorry, buddy, ain't going to turn out real well. All right, basically is what the story says. He's honest, right? We always equate, well, when I'm kind, I can't be honest. I think Joseph was kind and honest. I will tell you, number one flaw of my leadership over all the years here is I can err always on the side of kindness. I typically always go to the side of kindness. I don't always go to the side of honesty, because if I'm too honest, I don't want to hurt their feelings, and I don't want people to not like me. How many of you go, that's me? Raise your hand. How many of you go, I don't mind, I love being honest with people? Raise your hand. You're dangerous. Let me know not to sit at your table, all right? So y'all scare me. But Joseph modeled kindness and honesty. It's really interesting. He did not move away from the detail of this, he was, and I love this phrase, I want you to write this down. He was kind enough to be honest. He was kind enough to be honest. There was a former player for the Atlanta Braves, I'll leave him unnamed, but his reputation in Major League Baseball was horrific. From clubhouse attendants to assistant coaches to teammates to other coaches. But he was good. Nobody ever said anything to him. Finally, the Braves let him go, and he got brought up to a team up north and sat down with the GM, and the GM said, I'm going to be really honest with you. My struggle in bringing you here is this is your reputation. And he said, really? He said, you didn't know that? He said, nobody's ever told me. And he said that conversation changed. He ended up being a World Series MVP after that. And he said if that GM had not been honest with him, he would have ended his career as a hated man and would have never known it. Nobody ever loved him enough to be honest with him. Honesty can hurt at times, but it can still be kind, right? Sometimes, how many of y'all have been told something by a superior, a coach, somebody you're working for, and it hurt your feelings, but it was the best thing you ever heard? Raise your hand. All of us. That's part of life, right? It's part of growth. Somebody said something we didn't want to hear. Liberty University, senior year, bullpen. Mike, you're not going to pitch anymore. Why? They could have said, well, let's go back and look at your career. All right, and they could have done that, but they didn't. They were kind enough not to do that. It was the best thing I ever heard. And it was truth. It needed to happen. Kindness and honesty can commingle. They can work together. I love this little phrase. Honesty is love in kindness. Honesty in love is kindness. Managers often delude themselves into believing that if something isn't discussed, then somehow it'll magically doesn't exist. A manager's inability to acknowledge it only serves to weaken the leader instead. When we don't address things, everybody look at me, because I want to be kind, you're not doing anybody any favors. Can we all agree on that? You're not doing anybody any favors. And in fact, it's going to make it harder as time goes. In fact, there's a great guy online named the Leadership Freak, Dan Rockwell. He's written tons and tons of great stuff. He said, elevate your kindness by bringing toughness and kindness together. Don't lead with toughness, always lead with kindness. And then he gave phrases. I want to say yes, but at this time, I have to say no. That got said to me so many times asking girls out on dates. But anyways, I don't know really what to do with that. But I work to be fair with everyone, but this time I can't make an exception. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to say no, but this time I have to. Those are hard things said in kind ways. And number 4, Joseph was disappointed by them. I don't have a great end of the story. Now, it's going to end well, spoiler alert, but he was disappointed. One guy interpreted gets impaled, means he's goner. The other one gets elevated to his old position, and he forgot Joseph. Everybody look at me. For 2 years. You interpreted the guy's dream, and all Joseph asked, hey, when you get back in the palace, just remember me down here. You got it, buddy. You got it. And he gets up there. 2 years later, he remembers Joseph. Sometimes showing kindness may lose something for you short term, but gain something for you long term. So today, I want to invite 3 people up to the stage. Andy Duncan, come up here real quick. Mayor Allie Good, and Dr. Ike Reichard. Would y'all welcome these guys up to the stage? These are, come on up. We'll move this back a little bit. I have had the blessing of knowing these three men for years. I've known Ike since I was 12 years old. I'm 28 now, and so it's just been 16 years, right? It wasn't that long ago. I've known him since I was 12. I've known Andy since at least 25 years here in this community. And Mayor, how long have you been mayor now? 23 years. What do all these men have in common? Anybody want to raise your hand? If you know them, a lot of you know them. Somebody raise your hand. What do they have in common, Angie? Kind people. Ryan Dyer.
Servant leaders.
What else do they have in common? These three men.
They're always for other people.
What else do they have in common?
Success.
How many times have you had somebody run against you as mayor? Wouldn't it be nice to live in the United States of America and we didn't deal with another election? Never had anybody run against him, and none of you get ideas. Do not let it germinate from this room, all right? And so, he's the best. James Albright, you've served in the city of Ackworth for how long? 25 years. What can you say about Mayor? Most dynamic public servant I've ever known. Here for one of my Chick-fil-A friends. What could you tell us about Andy Duncan?
Not all at once.
They don't want to get their hands up at the same time. I saw it. I mean, they're all going. Brenda, you go, Brenda.
His generosity, not only with his resources, but his time. So like if I'm doing like an orientation with these 16-year-old kids, he's going to stop by and listen to their story and ask what's going on and their name and where they're from. And he's going to let them know that if there's anything I can ever do to you, and we have 300 team members. If I can do anything for you, please come talk to me.
Ann Lynch, I'm going to put you on the spot. I've never called on you. I'm using my one bullet. I got one bullet. I get to use it every year. What would you say about Ike Reichard? Casey Lynch, what would you say about Ike Reichard?
I would echo that. My wife did an event with Ike here recently and came home and said, I don't know if I've ever met anybody that kind in my entire life.
And these...
When you were asking things about the three of us, not one of you said good looking.
It's a travesty, Ike. But I think that was assumed. I think it was assumed.
I just assumed there was at least one senator.
Here's what I love. When I was writing this and Steve had sent it to me and we were going through it over the weekend, these three men are the picture of kindness. We sat at my house last spring with 5 church planners from across the country that grew up here at this church, that are out all over the country, invited Ike to come to dinner. We were there 2.5 hours around the dinner table. He left and I said, what's the one lesson you learned from dinner tonight? And one of the guys goes, Ike has a lot of stories. That was one lesson from the night. I was like, yes, he has a lot of stories. What was the biggest lesson you learned? And they said he never spoke unkindly of anyone. 2 hours. Everything you heard was kind. Everything. Everything you could think of. And the man has been in ministry, how many years now, Ike? 50 years in ministry. 50 years in ministry. And he only spoke kindly of people. This church is where it is today because of Ike Reichard. He showed up with a dream and a vision. I got to come alongside along with a great team, and he set a sail. And listen, I sat in a lot of conversations, Jamie and I talk about this a lot, that were hard conversations he handled in a kind way. He set us a sail, and then these two gentlemen, we get to serve in this community together because of what happened years ago. Jamie, you know these three guys very well, Jamie Maddox. How would you describe these three guys?
It's an honest man.
They're all humble men that in my view, exude what Christ was about when he reached out to everyone.
That's right.
Just church people, but to everyone he ran into. And Ike has a special place in my heart forever because one day, years and years ago, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, one day you're going to work at North Star. I was at Coca-Cola, and a couple of times in the church. But all three of them are special. I love playing pickleball with Tommy. And Andy is just so kind to my whole family when he sees them. And I love everyone.
It's good stuff. Would y'all pray with me? Father, I thank you for these three men. They're on my Hall of Fame wall. And God, when I think about your kindness to me, God, I think about how you showed kindness by crossing my path as a 12-year-old with New Hope Baptist Church. And then moving me here to this community that I'd never been to so I could meet Mayor Allie Good and Andy Duncan. And all of them have added to my life by their kindness. They hear, they listen, they love, they show up, and they walk in when everybody else is walking out. All three of them. God, today I pray that they become models, modern day models for us of what kindness lived out looks like. You really do, in honor of Christmas, become the richest man in town when you do it God's way. And so, God, we thank you for them. We thank you for our time together. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Will you help me thank all of these guys today? I think another word for me that describes all four of them is consistent. You always know what you're going to get with them, and I appreciate that. As we wrap up today, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. You saw a clip from Mike's podcast. He's got a new podcast out with Phil Ryson this week, who's an athletic director. And so if you are working at all in youth sports and want to take a look at that, you can go over there and check that out. Also, we have a leader's toolbox. If you want to opt into that, and somebody asked me last week, if I opted in once, am I in? Yes, you're in if you've already done that, but you can scan that QR code, and it'll just give you kind of a recap of today and maybe some information that you want to pass along and share with those on your team. There are also, speaking of sharing with your team, there are some Christmas Eve invites there on your table. Shameless plug for us here at North Star. We've got 7 services. If you know somebody on your team, or if you yourself don't have a church home, we'd love to invite you, so you're welcome to grab those. There's a QR code on the back there as well. Our next meeting, if you want to go ahead and put it in your calendar, is January the 27th. So go ahead and make plans for that. And man, as we leave today, let's just be reminded that kindness wins. Let's do kind things for other people, not because of who they are, but because of who we are. Thank you guys for being here. Have a great day. You're dismissed.